America's housing market isn't drifting into trouble. It's plunging into a full-scale collapse that no one can afford to ignore. Behind the headlines, prices are cracking, inventories are swelling, insurance bills are exploding, and entire communities are quietly slipping into an economic danger zone. What looked like a temporary cool-down has morphed into a structural crisis, driven by historic interest rates, departing insurers, climate pressures, and a migration wave that's suddenly reversing. Families who once chased opportunity across the Sun Belt are now packing up again, leaving oversupplied developments and overheated markets struggling to stay afloat. And experts warn that if these trends continue, 10 states in particular are heading toward a breaking point they may not survive by 2026. From coastal hotspots to desert boomtowns, from high-tax metros to hurricane-stressed regions, the warning signs are everywhere. If you know where to look today, we're exposing the states most at risk and the forces pushing their housing markets to the edge. Let's begin. Number 1. California. California was once seen as the crown jewel of American real estate, a place where home values seemed immune to downturns and demand never stopped rising. But that image is shattering as the state faces one of its most severe housing corrections in decades. What began as a mild cool-down has turned into a deep structural decline driven by population loss, runaway insurance costs, and affordability levels that have pushed middle-class families to flee in record numbers. Reports indicate that listings in cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Sacramento are sitting longer, with price cuts becoming more common as sellers confront a market that no longer rewards unrealistic expectations. On top of that, wildfire risk has triggered an insurance crisis, leaving homeowners with premiums that double overnight, or policies that get dropped entirely. Pushing many into financial stress they never anticipated. Renters are feeling the strain too, as high costs collide with stagnant wages and shrinking job markets in previously booming tech hubs. All these pressures are creating a slow-motion unraveling that threatens California's long-term stability. And just as the Golden State struggles to regain its footing, another region on the opposite side of the country is facing an equally dangerous tipping point. Number 2. Florida. Florida spent years as America's hottest housing destination, a place where low taxes, warm weather, and soaring demand made real estate feel like a guaranteed win. But that momentum has flipped as the state becomes ground zero for an insurance and affordability meltdown that's driving buyers away. For many homeowners, the turning point came when insurance premiums began climbing faster than property values, with some residents now paying more for coverage than for their mortgage itself. Major insurers have pulled out entirely, leaving homeowners scrambling for limited state-backed options that offer less protection at dramatically higher costs. At the same time, inventories are swelling in markets like Tampa, Orlando, and Miami as sellers struggle to attract buyers willing to shoulder these mounting risks. Condos, once a favorite for investors, are seeing falling demand amid new safety regulations and higher association fees triggered by recent collapses and hurricane threats. Families who moved in during the boom are realizing the long-term costs are unsustainable. And analysts warn Florida's market is heading toward a correction far steeper than most expect. As the Sunshine State strains under its own weight, the next major market shows how overbuilding and slowing migration can create an entirely different kind of crisis. If you live in one of these states, plan to buy, or are thinking about investing, pay close attention, because the next states prove this crisis isn't a coincidence, but a pattern. So keep watching before you make a costly mistake. Number 3. Texas. Texas long carried the reputation of being the place where housing was affordable, land was plentiful, and families could build a future without the crushing costs seen on the coasts. But that promise is starting to fracture under the weight of rapid overbuilding and a sudden slowdown in demand. During the pandemic boom, developers raced to put up homes across Austin, Dallas, and Houston, confident that waves of newcomers would keep absorption high and prices rising. Yet the market has flipped as migration cools, and inventories pile up at levels not seen in years. Buyers who once lined up for new builds are now hesitating as mortgage rates stay elevated and property taxes climb, making the true cost of homeownership far higher than advertised. Meanwhile, sellers are cutting prices in neighborhoods that were bidding war battlegrounds just 2 years ago, signaling that the frenzy has given way to uncertainty. Investors who flooded into short-term rentals and suburban developments are quietly retreating, leaving behind pockets of oversupply that could push values down further. And as Texas tries to rebalance, another desert state is showing what happens when a boomtown rush meets a sharp economic reality check. Number 4. Nevada. Nevada's housing market was once the poster child of a pandemic boom, fueled by Californians seeking cheaper living, investors snapping up properties in bulk, and Las Vegas reinventing itself as a magnet for remote workers. But that surge has cooled into a hard landing as demand dries up and economic pressures mount. What used to be a fast-moving market is now slowing sharply, with homes sitting longer and price reductions becoming the norm as buyers step back from inflated values that no longer match local incomes. Rising interest rates have hit Nevada especially hard, shrinking affordability in a state where many purchases relied on flexible financing and investor enthusiasm rather than deep-rooted stability. Tourism-linked jobs, which make up a large part of the workforce, remain vulnerable to economic swings, creating uncertainty that makes long-term homeownership feel risky for many families. Investors who once drove the frenzy are unwinding positions, flooding certain neighborhoods with listings that push prices down even faster. As these pressures converge, Nevada is grappling with the hangover of a boom that moved too quickly for its own good. And the next state reveals how environmental constraints can accelerate an already fragile market. Number 5. Arizona. Arizona's housing market, once celebrated as an affordable desert escape with steady growth and booming Sunbelt appeal, is now facing a reckoning as overvaluation, extreme heat, and mounting water concerns collide to push the state toward a precarious future. What began as a pandemic surge of remote workers and investors pouring into cities like Phoenix, Mesa, and Scottsdale has shifted into a slowdown marked by rising inventories and price cuts that were unthinkable just a few years ago. Reports indicate that many homes purchased at peak prices are now sitting underwater, while buyers hesitate as 110-degree summers stretch longer and water shortages trigger new restrictions across the region. Insurance costs are creeping upward as heat-related damage and wildfire risks increase, adding yet another layer of financial strain for homeowners already stretched by higher mortgage rates. Meanwhile, local wages have failed to keep pace with soaring home values, leaving residents stuck between renting indefinitely or overpaying for homes that may lose value as conditions worsen. These pressures are creating a fragile environment that could accelerate declines into 2026. And just as Arizona grapples with environmental realities, the next state shows how even lifestyle-driven markets can hit a wall when costs spiral beyond reach. Number 6. Colorado. Colorado, once viewed as the ideal blend of outdoor lifestyle, booming job markets, and stable home appreciation, is now confronting a sharp shift as affordability collapses and climate-related risks drive costs higher than many residents can manage. For years, cities like Denver, Boulder, and Colorado Springs attracted newcomers seeking mountain views and strong employment, pushing home prices to record highs that seemed justified by demand. But that momentum has stalled as interest rates remain elevated, inventories rise, and wages fail to keep up with the state's rapid cost of living. At the same time, Colorado's increasing vulnerability to wildfires, hailstorms, and extreme weather has driven insurance premiums upward, leaving many homeowners shocked by sudden spikes in annual costs or outright policy cancellations. Renters aren't faring much better, as limited supply in mountain towns keeps prices inflated far beyond local incomes, pushing workers farther from their jobs and straining community infrastructure. As these forces collide, analysts warn that Colorado's market is shifting from a premium destination to a financial pressure point, And the next state reveals how even paradise-level appeal can't shield a region from economic reality. 7. Hawaii. Hawaii has always carried an almost mythical status in the housing world, a paradise where real estate seemed untouchable and demand from tourists, investors, and offshore buyers kept prices rising no matter the conditions. But that illusion is cracking as the islands face deep economic and environmental pressure. What made Hawaii's market feel invincible is now working against it. Extreme scarcity of land, dependence on tourism, and an economy highly sensitive to global shifts. After the Maui wildfires and years of rising insurance costs, many homeowners are confronting premiums that have doubled or tripled, while some insurers have quietly backed away from high-risk zones altogether. At the same time, local residents, many priced out for decades, are seeing even fewer paths to ownership, as wages remain stagnant and living costs surge far faster than incomes. Homes that once sold instantly are sitting longer, and certain markets are seeing price declines that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. Investors are also retreating as regulations tighten on short-term rentals, and economic uncertainty grows. These trends signal a fragile future for the islands. And as Hawaii struggles under the weight of its own paradise premium, the next state shows how repeated disasters can reshape an entire housing landscape. Number 8. Louisiana. Louisiana's housing market has long battled the realities of living along the Gulf Coast, but in recent years, those challenges have escalated into a full-blown crisis that's pushing the state toward a breaking point. What once felt like a manageable balance between coastal risk and affordable living has shifted dramatically as repeated hurricanes, flooding events, and infrastructure failures have devastated neighborhoods and driven insurance markets into chaos. Homeowners are encountering premiums that soar by thousands of dollars overnight, or discovering their policies won't be renewed at all, forcing many onto the state's last resort insurer, with far higher costs and less coverage. These pressures have begun suppressing demand, with buyers hesitant to enter markets where long-term security feels increasingly uncertain. Meanwhile, aging housing stock, slow recovery efforts, and population decline in several parishes create a feedback loop that leaves entire communities vulnerable to disinvestment. For renters, the situation is similarly grim as landlords pass on rising insurance and repair costs, pushing rents higher in regions already struggling with limited economic opportunity. As Louisiana grapples with the compounding effects of climate and financial instability, the next state shows how even high-income regions can falter when affordability spirals out of reach. Number 9. New Jersey. New Jersey's housing market, long supported by its proximity to New York City and its reputation for strong suburban communities, is beginning to show fractures as affordability erodes and climate risks intensify. For years, families moved here for good schools and stable neighborhoods, accepting high property taxes as part of the deal. But that balance is shifting as costs outpace incomes, and remote work reduces the appeal of long-distance commuting. Inventory levels are creeping upward in several counties, and buyers are increasingly walking away from deals once they see the true cost of ownership. From rising taxes to steep insurance premiums tied to coastal flood zones, shore communities, once magnets for vacation homes and rental investors, are seeing growing uncertainty as storms become more frequent and rebuilding costs soar. At the same time, many first-time buyers feel squeezed out as prices remain elevated despite weakening demand, creating a disconnect that stalls the market. These pressures point to a future where even high-income suburban enclaves aren't immune to decline. And as New Jersey faces its own affordability and climate squeeze, the next state shows how demographic shifts can destabilize a market already stretched thin. 10. Illinois. Illinois has been wrestling with housing instability for years, but recent trends suggest the state is heading toward a deeper crisis, as population loss, high taxes, and economic uncertainty converge into a perfect storm. What once made Illinois attractive, affordable Midwestern living paired with strong urban job markets, has been overshadowed by a long-running exodus of residents leaving for states with lower costs and more opportunity. This steady outflow has weakened demand in many communities, leaving homes sitting longer on the market and pushing sellers to cut prices just to attract attention. In cities like Chicago, rising crime concerns, stalled wage growth, and growing municipal debts have added pressure, while in smaller towns, aging housing stock and limited new development leave few appealing options for buyers who remain property taxes, some of the highest in the nation, continue to strain homeowners and discourage new buyers from entering the market, widening the gap between listing prices and what families can realistically afford. As Illinois grapples with a shrinking tax base and declining demand, its market risks slipping into long-term stagnation. And together, these 10 states reveal a national pattern that points toward a much larger housing reckoning ahead. Across the country, the signs are clear. America's housing market isn't experiencing a minor correction. It's undergoing a structural shift that exposes deep vulnerabilities in states once seen as unshakable. From soaring insurance premiums to climate disasters, from population declines to overbuilding and unsustainable costs, each of these 10 states shows a different piece of the same collapsing puzzle. The danger isn't just falling home values, it's the long-term instability that follows when entire regions become too expensive, too risky, or too unpredictable for families to build a future. As we move toward 2026, the question isn't whether the housing market will change. It's how quickly these pressures will spread and who will be prepared. When they do, stay informed, stay alert, and if you're planning to buy, sell, or invest, make sure you're looking beyond the headlines. The next few years will redefine where Americans live and what homeownership really means.